Have you ever been standing in a room where everyone else suddenly leans forward, eyes locked on a screen, voices rising in unison, and you feel absolutely nothing? No tension, no excitement, just a strange awareness that something important is happening for everyone else. And somehow, it never quite reaches you. In a country where entire Sundays revolve around kickoff times, where strangers high-five like lifelong friends over a single play, where emotions swing wildly based on the performance of people they'll never meet, there exists a small but steady group of people who simply don't plug into it. Not out of rebellion, not because they're trying to be different. They just watch the spectacle unfold and feel as if the signal is being broadcast on a frequency they were never tuned to receive. Most people assume this means something is missing, that these individuals lack passion, or community, or some fundamental social instinct. But psychology tells a much more interesting story, one that has less to do with absence and more to do with awareness. At the heart of sports fandom is something ancient. Long before stadiums and jerseys, human survival depended on tribes. Belonging wasn't optional. It was life or death. Your group was your shield, your identity, your safety. And while modern life has replaced spears with smartphones, the brain never stopped running the same old software. Sports tap directly into that wiring. When a team wins, the brain reacts as if you won. Dopamine surges. Testosterone shifts. The body celebrates a victory it didn't physically earn, but emotionally claims all the same. The brain doesn't care that you were on a couch instead of the field. It recognizes symbols, colors, allegiance, and it responds accordingly. But here's where things get interesting. People who don't obsess over sports aren't immune to tribal instinct. They're not above it. They haven't evolved past it. Instead, their brains apply a filter, a pause, a quiet question most people never stop to ask. Why this tribe? Why should loyalty be assigned by geography instead of values? Why should emotional investment be handed to organizations that change players yearly, ownership constantly, and allegiance whenever profit demands it? To them, the connection feels symbolic, but hollow, manufactured. A story they're invited to feel, but not one that resonates deeply enough to take root. This doesn't mean they reject belonging. In fact, many of them crave it intensely. They just look for it elsewhere, in shared ideas, shared creations, shared curiosity. In communities built around building something instead of defending something. Where others inherit loyalty, they choose it. And that single difference, small as it seems, quietly reshapes how they experience the world. Because once you stop accepting default identities, you start noticing how many of them exist, and how rarely we question why we carry them. And that realization opens up a deeper question. If they're not giving their attention to the game, where is it going instead? Once you stop asking why they don't care about sports, a more revealing question quietly takes its place. What do they care about instead? Because attention is never absent, it's only redirected. And for people who don't obsess over sports, that redirection is intentional in ways most people never articulate. The human mind has limited cognitive real estate. There's only so much emotional energy, focus, and long-term investment it can sustain before something else has to give. Being a true sports fan, beyond casual highlights, demands a remarkable amount of that space. Rosters change, stats evolve, narratives stretch across seasons. Rivalries accumulate history. Wins linger. Losses sting. Over time, it becomes less like entertainment and more like an ongoing relationship that requires upkeep. People who opt out tend to recognize this early, often without consciously realizing it. Their mind scans the cost and asks a quiet question. Is this where I want my focus to live? For many of them, the answer is no. Not because sports lack value, but because something else already occupies that space. Their attention is invested in pursuits that offer a different kind of return. Mastery instead of momentum. Creation instead of consumption. Understanding instead of affiliation. Some pour that energy into learning complex systems, markets, technology, philosophy, psychology itself. Others sink deeply into craft, music, writing, engineering, building things that didn't exist before they touched them. And once that investment is made, it becomes self-reinforcing. The brain begins to associate fulfillment not with watching outcomes, but with shaping them. This is where a subtle psychological distinction emerges. Sports fandom offers borrowed significance. You feel the weight of victory without having to carry responsibility for it. The emotional payoff is real, but outsourced. For some people, that's exactly the point. It's relief, escape, permission to let go. But for those who don't follow sports, that same structure feels unsatisfying. Not because they don't enjoy stories, but because they want authorship. They want friction. They want feedback loops that connect effort directly to outcome. When progress happens, they know where it came from. When failure hits, it belongs to them too. Their brain learns to prefer agency over spectacle, and once that preference sets in, passive investment starts to feel strangely empty. Watching someone else chase excellence feels less compelling than chasing it yourself, even if the pursuit is slower, lonelier, and far less visible. This also explains why attempts to convert them rarely work. You can explain the rules, teach the stats, invite them to games, but without emotional identification, the mirror never fully activates. The excitement feels distant, like watching a celebration through glass, appreciated intellectually, but never embodied. Their attention simply refuses to lock on. Not because they're closed off, but because it's already spoken for. And here's the quiet truth most people miss. This isn't about discipline or willpower. It's about alignment. When attention aligns with values, obsession isn't required. Focus happens naturally. Effort sustains itself. Time disappears without being stolen. People who don't obsess over sports have usually found that alignment somewhere else. And once you experience that kind of absorption, it's hard to trade it for anything that feels less personal. But attention alone doesn't explain everything. Because even when we don't choose a passion, our brains still look for heroes. So who do they mirror instead? Even when people don't care about sports, their brains are still doing something deeply human in the background. They're still looking for figures to latch onto. Still searching for moments that spark awe, tension, and emotional lift. Because the mind doesn't stop wanting inspiration just because it rejects a stadium. Inside the brain are networks that light up when we watch others act with precision, courage, or mastery. When you see someone do something difficult well, really well, your nervous system doesn't stay neutral. It reacts. Heart rate changes. Muscles subtly tense. Attention sharpens. On some level, the brain is rehearsing the action as if it were your own. For sports fans, this connection is obvious. When an athlete executes a perfect play, it feels personal. But for people who don't follow sports, that same neurological machinery activates elsewhere. They might feel it watching a musician lose themselves in a performance, fingers moving faster than conscious thought. Or seeing an engineer explain a system so complex it feels almost elegant. Or observing someone build, repair, or create something with such care that the process itself becomes mesmerizing. The difference isn't the presence of admiration, it's the object of it. Where one mind mirrors the athlete, another mirrors the maker. Where one borrows victory from a scoreboard, another borrows it from precision, creativity, or depth. Their heroes aren't defined by uniforms or franchises. They're defined by competence, by intention, by mastery, quietly earned rather than loudly celebrated. This choice shapes identity in subtle ways. When your role models are performers, you learn to measure life in moments, highs, losses, comebacks. When your role models are builders, thinkers, or creators, you learn to measure life in progress, in refinement, in layers added over time. Neither is wrong, but they lead to very different internal rhythms. This also explains why many people who don't follow sports are drawn to long, solitary pursuits. Things that don't offer instant applause. Things where feedback is delayed and often private. Their brains have learned to tolerate silence between milestones, to find satisfaction not in being seen, but in being aligned with the work itself. And because of that, spectacle loses its grip. The drama of last-second wins or crushing defeats feels external, almost theatrical, entertaining to observe, but disconnected from their sense of self. They don't feel the urge to borrow someone else's emotional arc when they're already living inside one of their own. There's another layer here that rarely gets discussed. Sports narratives are pre-written. The roles are assigned. The stakes are known. All you have to do is show up and feel what the story asks you to feel. For many, that's comforting. It removes uncertainty. But the minds that don't gravitate towards sports often resist prepackaged meaning. They're less comfortable stepping into roles they didn't choose. They want to shape the narrative as they go, even if that means uncertainty, friction, and longer stretches without clarity. They don't want to be handed meaning. They want to build it. And that choice changes how they engage with the world. They don't wait for moments to matter. They make them matter. Quietly. Incrementally. Often without witnesses. But choosing different heroes comes with a cost, because in a world built around shared spectacle, opting out changes how you connect with people. There is a price to stepping away from the game, and the people who do it are usually aware of it long before they can put it into words. Sports are more than entertainment. They're social glue. They're a shared language that requires no intimacy, no vulnerability, no explanation. You can walk into an office, a bar, a family gathering, and instantly participate just by knowing the score. It's a universal handshake, a safe entry point into connection. And when you don't have that language, something subtle happens. There's a pause when the conversation turns your way. A moment where people expect recognition, agreement, or excitement, and instead, they get neutrality. Not judgment, not disdain, just absence. And absence in social spaces can feel louder than disagreement. People who don't follow sports learn this early. Some adapt by memorizing just enough to blend in. A headline here, a final score there. Others redirect conversations naturally, steering toward topics they actually care about. And some simply accept that certain rooms will always feel slightly misaligned. But here's what's rarely acknowledged. When sports are removed from the equation, conversations change shape. Without the easy default, people are forced to reach deeper. They ask different questions. They talk about work, ideas, frustrations, ambitions. The interaction becomes less performative and more personal. Not always immediately, but inevitably. Many people who don't obsess over sports report that their relationships form more slowly, but often with greater depth. Fewer connections, but stronger ones. Less bonding over shared spectacle, more bonding over shared values or curiosity. They discover something quietly profound. Not all connection is created equal. Some bonds exist because they're easy. Others exist because they're real. There's also the matter of presence. Think about what a big game does to time. For hours, the outside world fades. Stress pauses. Attention narrows. For many people, that's relief. A socially sanctioned escape where nothing else is demanded of them. People who don't follow sports aren't immune to that need. They just satisfy it differently. They find absorption elsewhere, deep work, creative flow, problem solving, building something that demands full attention. And while those states may not come with crowds or chance, they offer something equally powerful. Continuity. When the game ends, it's over. When a project ends, something remains. A skill sharpened. A system improved. A piece of work completed. This doesn't make one path better than the other, but it does reveal a difference in the orientation. One leans toward shared experience. The other leans toward personal evolution. And most people never consciously choose between the two. The ones who don't obsess over sports often have. Not in a dramatic way. Not as a rejection. But as a quiet decision about where their attention feels most alive. About what kind of satisfaction lasts longer than a final whistle. About what kind of identity they want to build when no one is watching. They're not empty during the game. They're occupied. Their silence isn't disinterest. It's investment elsewhere. A different engine humming beneath the surface. One that doesn't react to scores or standings, but to progress, insight, and creation. And that's the part that's easy to miss. Because opting out doesn't look like participation. But it is. Just in a form that doesn't come with jerseys, chants, or trophies. So the real question isn't why they don't care about the game. It's whether we ever stop to ask ourselves where our attention is going and what it's quietly turning us into.